when it warms up again. Very complex. So this is data, actual measurements. There are two colors here, two zones. One is called the last warning zone, which begins at 1.5 degrees centigrade and ends at 2 degrees centigrade. That's 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. For those of you who don't know the conversion, that's 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And then there's the danger zone, which is anything above 2 degrees centigrade, and I'll tell you about why that's dangerous in a minute. And then there are four curves. So these curves are not data, they're predictions. They're computer simulated predictions. You get the very best scientists who think they understand all the physics, all the chemistry, all the biology, all the botany, all the fluid flow mechanics of how the Earth's atmosphere works and how the atmosphere interacts with the Earth and with outer space. And you program that all up into a monstrously large computer program. And different groups around the world have their own programs. This is not the result of any one program. It's the result of many programs and the average of many programs. And each program is run many times because there are so many variables, so many knobs you can turn. So, in 2010, these guys published a paper that said, well, there are four scenarios we might consider. What should we do about global warming? What should we do about carbon dioxide? What should we do about methane? What should we do about black carbon? They picked four scenarios. First scenario is called the reference scenario. That's the purple line. That means business as usual. They just program into these computer programs, these simulators, using Monte Carlo simulation, the same rate of production of fossil fuels that's predicted by the industry, by the EIA and by the IEA, the International Energy Agency, the Energy Information Agency, and the various operators like BP and Exxon who do their own predictions. They predict how much fossil fuel is going to be used. They have to. It's part of their business model. You can't fault Exxon for not predicting how much gas and oil they're going to sell. So you take all that information and you say, don't change anything. Don't put a carbon tax, don't reduce, don't constrain, business as usual. And the computer model says, if that happens, then we reach the yellow zone in the year 2040. No, this is 2030. 2030. We reach the red zone in 2043. I think a lot of us will still be alive. Certainly our children will be alive. Certainly our grandchildren will be alive. And since this is a computer prediction, it has error. I said that how many times tonight? No prediction is a number. It's got an error bar. Here's the error bar. That. So this line could be all the way up here, or it could be all the way down here. We don't know. Computer model is not perfect. It's not exact. It's a prediction into the future. So that's scenario number one. Scenario number two is, if we had started in 2010 to substantially reduce the rate at which we're burning fossil fuels, oil, coal, natural gas, we would gradually reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But if and only if we reduce the rate of burning. That is, we can't increase the use of fossil fuels, we start to decrease the use of fossil fuels in 2010, but we didn't. Nor did we do it in 11 or 12 or 13. And the computer model says, well, if we start to reduce carbon dioxide using carbon dioxide reduction measures, we can delay getting into the red zone by about 2 years. That's pretty bad news. Do you understand why that's true? In other words, if we had done everything that we might politically, economically, and sociologically have done starting in 2010 to reduce the burning of fossil fuels, it doesn't make a hell of a difference. The reason is carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere for 1,000 years. The stuff that's up there right now that's causing global warming, this is going to be hard to take, folks. Stuff that we largely put there. We meaning Western Europe, the United States, Russia. Because we industrialized first. Unless somebody invents some way to suck it out of the atmosphere, it's going to be there, and we really don't have an effect until many years from now. So that's scenario number 2. Scenario number 3 is, suppose back in 2010, we took measures to substantially reduce emissions of methane and black carbon into the atmosphere. We stopped drilling for natural gas, we stopped fracking for natural gas, we stopped compressing it, processing it, storing it, transmitting it, distributing it. In other words, we stopped all the leaks gradually around the world. By the way, the EPA doesn't control China or Russia or Brazil or the USA. But if we had started back in 2010 with reductions in methane and black carbon, look what happens. The climate changes more rapidly. The atmosphere is more responsive to changes in methane concentration than carbon dioxide. Why? Because methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, right? 1 pound of methane is the same as 86 pounds of carbon dioxide. So we can delay getting into the red zone until the year 2060. But we still will probably get into the red zone. But again, there's error, right? That curve could be down here. Could be we never get into the red zone. Or it could be we get into the red zone a lot earlier. So that scenario says if you're going to spend $1 doing anything, it would be better spent to reduce methane emissions and black carbon emissions than $1 spent reducing carbon dioxide emissions, because the harm's already done. Finally, the obvious thing that we should have been doing, starting much earlier than this, is measures to reduce, not reduce the rate of increase, but reduce the actual burning and emission of carbon dioxide, methane, and black carbon. Because then the computer models say, on average, the mean prediction, the most expected prediction, is we never get into the red zone. We get well into the yellow zone, and that's bad enough. So that's the best they had done in 2010, and sometime in the next few weeks, this will be updated based on the latest IPCC AR5. And of course, we'll have 3 more years of data here. And these error bars are going to shrink because we don't have to predict this far into the future. The farther into the future you try to predict, the larger the errors. This 2 degrees centigrade is the number that most climate scientists say is really the number that's going to cause various tipping points as a result of global warming. Some of those we're already seeing. Glaciers retreating, Arctic ice cover shrinking, Greenland ice cap shrinking, sea level rise, sea level heating, increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, melting of permafrost. As those things happen, you get feedbacks. The more of those things happen, the more global warming you get. And so things start to accelerate and you get runaway greenhouse effect. So we don't want to get there. Okay. Enough. I want to leave time for Q&A. So let me just summarize and tell you what I told you. Because I told you what I was going to tell you, and I told you. Now I'm going to tell you what I did. I came here with essentially a 2-part message based on a common theme, which is drilling for shale gas has risk. It has risk to local water supplies because one can never guarantee that any shale gas well will not leak. I wanted to give you an insight into what the probabilities are starting to look like here in Pennsylvania in a modern shale gas play with the toughest regulations, the best operators, the best equipment, the best cement. And at the same time, I wanted you to make sure that a well that's leaking, whether it's a new well or a lost and abandoned well. A well that's leaking into the atmosphere is another contributor to methane in the atmosphere, unburned. And any methane that gets into the atmosphere unburned is a potent greenhouse gas that exacerbates problems that we're already beginning to see. What's the take home? What do I do? I'm sure everybody here is saying, well, that's a pretty depressing message, Professor Ingraffea. You got anything good for us? Is there going to be a cartoon now? Yeah, there is a positive message. If you ask me whether I think any of this is going to come true, I don't think so. Not because I think these predictions are wrong. I think one of the assumptions behind those predictions is wrong, and that is that we won't do anything. We, you, me. So here's what you can do. Start at home. You've heard this before. I'm not going to say anything you haven't heard before. Conservation and efficiency. Turn off the lights when you don't need them. Buy LEDs. Conservation and efficiency. Get rid of your gas-fired hot water heater and your gas-fired home heater and buy air source heat pumps. Be cheaper in the long run. They only use electricity. But Professor Ingraffea, aren't we going to have to burn more coal for electricity? Well, no. Put PV on your roof. And if you can't put PV on your roof, form a collective. Buy 5 acres of land somewhere around here that hasn't been leased up. And put a community-sized solar farm on it. Or form a collective and put a wind farm up. Now, I'm not saying that just because Ithaca is the most enlightened community in the country, I'm not saying we got it all right, but everything I just described is happening in spades in Tompkins County, New York, because we are walking the walk. Cornell University, Ithaca, New York, Tompkins County, New York has the reputation for saying no the loudest, and also for saying there's something better the loudest. So we have a community wind farm that's under construction. 600 or 700 people got together, everybody put $1,000 in, and Cornell University and Ithaca College are buying the electricity from us. Whoopee. We have solarized Tompkins County. We buy solar panels by thousands. Drives the price way down. We have companies coming from all over the country trying to install solar panels on roofs all over the county. So you can begin at home. Conservation and efficiency, if you can afford now, PV, either individually or in community groups, do it. So that's the home scale, that's the community scale. Who you vote for is important. You got an election coming up next year for governor. The governor will probably replace the commissioner of DEP. Think long and hard about who you want in those positions. So there are things we can do, and this astounding thing that is often lost in all the noise about fracking is that most of the things we do wind up costing us less money than we're paying now for the fuel we're using. And all those things that we do reduce potential human health effects. So the obvious question then is, why not you do them? Misinformation, uninformation, hesitation. Some of them take some initial capital investment that you might not have right now. I can understand that. But we can all do something. The next car you buy. The next appliance you buy. Are you recycling or are you not recycling? It all helps. So that's the message. I wanted to leave you with an uplifting note of yes, we all have a responsibility of being part of the problem, but we all have the opportunity to become part of the solution to the problem. So accept the former, do the latter. Thank you very much, and
I just have to say there has to be a global power shift. Keep on thinking, GPS, global power shift. A few weeks ago, between 7,000 and 8,000 young people came to the convention center in Pittsburgh, and they said there has to be a global power shift. So let's do everything that we can to keep methane where it belongs, under the ground. So we're going to take questions and answers, and I wanted for Dr. Ingraffea, but I also want to say there will be people passing around the bucket so that we can have more programs like this. And so please, please put something in that bucket. Okay, and when you have your questions, make them as succinct as possible. You can give a little bit of background and stuff, and if you have a story to tell, please keep it to about 3 minutes.
I'm not giving a speech. Geology, could you tell us, you're a geologist, why is northeastern Pennsylvania different than around here?
Part of the answer to the question, why are we seeing a much higher existing percentage of wells leaking in northeastern Pennsylvania and projecting that a higher percentage will leak than in other parts of the state? Part of the answer is geology. The geology in northeastern Pennsylvania is much more confused, convoluted, folded, faulted. The Marcellus daylights